Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to unpack complex ideas and make them clear, actionable, really useful for you. Today, we're diving into something pretty universal, I think, that feeling of being, well, broken, or maybe overwhelmed, a bit lost. Our guide for this is Dr. Laura Williams' fantastic book, What to Do When You Feel Broken: How to Let Go of Negative Patterns, Heal Your Relationships, and Find Freedom.
Yeah, and it's really more than just a comforting read. This book, it really stands out. It feels like a genuine roadmap for healing, for actually rebuilding things. Dr. Williams does this amazing job of weaving together her own story, which includes some devastating trauma, with her clinical work, solid research, and crucially, really practical steps you can take.
Exactly. And that's what we want to do today. Our mission is to pull out the core wisdom, the tools from this book, to help you understand your own psychology better, to face those tough feelings and, move towards feeling more whole. We'll explore why we feel broken and, maybe more importantly, what we can actually do about it. So Dr. Williams kicks things off with something I found really profound. It's this disparity, this gap between what our logic tells us and what we actually feel. How often does that happen, right? You know something in your head, but your gut, your emotions are saying something totally different. She uses her own examples, like feeling guilty about forgetting a birthday when logically it wasn't a huge deal, or feeling responsible for how someone else feels, things that don't quite add up rationally.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is how she connects that feeling, that internal split. She basically says, look, this discrepancy is often what feeling broken or fragmented feels like. Her point is that our thoughts really drive our feelings. So if we let those negative thoughts just run the show, define who we are, well, we effectively block ourselves from choosing something more positive. Her work is about learning how to step in right there at that point.
Which leads us nicely into redefining trauma, doesn't it? We tend to think of big T trauma, those huge life-altering events, abuse, major loss, things like that. But Dr. Williams really broadens that definition. She talks about small T traumas, the daily, maybe more subtle things, small hurts, disappointments, invalidations. These things still shape us, our personalities, how we relate to people, often without us even clocking it.
Absolutely. It really challenges that idea that you need some massive dramatic event to be carrying wounds. And her central message here is key. Trauma isn't just the event, it's the internal changes that happen because of it. The shifts in thoughts, feelings, behaviors. That's what leads to feeling broken or fragmented. It's like parts of us get split off. We try to hide them. Carl Jung called it the shadow self, that urge to conceal the parts we don't like.
Which raises a big question, I think, for everyone listening. If we all have these hidden bits, what's our role in dealing with them? Dr. Williams points out the societal issue. The stigma around mental health is still there, and we generally aren't explicitly taught basic mental health skills.
Right. It's not like school teaches you emotional regulation 101.
Exactly. So she argues pretty powerfully that it's actually our responsibility to learn these things, to teach ourselves so we can make positive changes. We can't do what we haven't learned.
And that's such a strong call to action when you think about it. It's about taking ownership. Okay, maybe past stuff influenced where you are now, but the power to change, to grow, that's in your hands now.
Okay, so if this feeling of being broken, these internal shifts from trauma have roots, where do we look? Dr. Williams takes us right back to childhood. Those early relationships, especially with our main caregiver, that attachment diet, create a kind of template,
A blueprint, yeah.
the blueprint, for how relationships work, how we see the world, and maybe most importantly, how we relate to ourselves. It's like a social learning theory in action, seeing how others behave and modeling it.
And so much of that learning, that conditioning, isn't even verbal. It's subtle. Think about, a parent giving you a certain look. Disappointment maybe, or anger, or just dismissal. No words needed. As kids, we soak that up, their moods, their expectations, the unspoken rules, and we adjust our behavior, often unconsciously. It gets baked into our psychology.
Which then brings us to this really powerful but maybe overlooked idea of intergenerational trauma, how patterns get passed down. Dr. Williams shares her own family story, her grandmother, her mother herself. She talks about patterns of anxiety, shyness, perfectionism, this tendency to kind of shrink away, pass down the line.
It's a really vivid example of how these unhelpful core beliefs and ways of relating can just echo through generations. But what's really hopeful in her message is that even if your childhood wasn't secure or loving or didn't build your esteem, you can find those things as an adult. It's possible. The key is recognizing when that internal alarm system, that threat response, can actually be turned down, and then figuring out what needs weren't met and finding healthy ways to meet them now.
She uses Beth's story to illustrate this really well. Beth went through a lot with her parents' messy split, her mom often playing the victim. And it left Beth with huge self-doubt, becoming a major people pleaser, always putting her own needs last to avoid conflict or disapproval.
Right. And Beth's turning point was really understanding that childhood conditioning, not just intellectually, but feeling it. She saw how these ingrained patterns, these schemas, like mental scripts about relationships being unsafe or expecting abandonment, were running her adult life. Recognizing how her mother's perspective had shaped her own self-view, how it controlled her reactions. That was the first step. Then she could start challenging those patterns, prioritizing herself. It's about interrupting those old cycles.
Okay, so moving on, let's unpack some of the common psychological hurdles Dr. Williams helps us with. First up, perfectionism. And she's clear, this isn't just about, having high standards or wanting to do well.
No, it goes much deeper. It's often tied to significant suffering, and it can pop up in ways that seem almost harmless on the surface. What's really striking, she admits she's an example of one type, socially prescribed perfectionism.
Right, that's the one where you believe others expect you to be perfect.
Exactly. For her, it came from a deep fear of failure, especially in competitive settings, and it led her to constantly minimize her own needs to try and win that external approval.
And she shares a really raw story about emotional suppression, too.
Yeah.
After her husband, Maddie, died. In those early days, she describes using perfectionism almost like a grief checklist, organizing things, seeming okay on the outside.
Functioning.
But inside, she was pushing down huge emotions, sometimes using wine to cope.
And that's such a stark contrast to what's actually needed, right? That space for emotion, for vulnerability. She acknowledges that while her actions seemed healthy initially, she was just stuck in doing, striving. She wasn't actually feeling the grief. That deeper processing, the real healing, she says, only started much later when she deliberately made space for it.
Now, something you hear talked about a lot online these days is trauma dumping. Dr. Williams makes a really useful distinction here between sharing your story with a real intention to change versus just dumping it.
Right. She defines trauma dumping as sharing emotional pain without much self-awareness about how it lands on others, or maybe externalizing blame, without taking responsibility for your own role in things. It lacks that intention for growth.
So the question for you listening becomes, how do we share vulnerably in a way that actually helps, that builds connection, instead of just offloading?
Well, the book really stresses that talking is vital, yes, but it needs to be paired with an intention to change, and importantly, with action. It's about integrating the talk with moving forward.
And this links to another trap, I think. Minimizing our own pain. It's so easy to do, isn't it? You see stories online of people who've faced absolutely horrific big T traumas.
Terrible things.
And you compare your own small t stuff and think, oh, mine's nothing. I shouldn't feel this bad.
And that comparison is just so damaging. It silences people. It stops the healing before it starts. Dr. Williams is really clear. Trauma isn't only defined by the most extreme events. Your pain is valid, period. Don't deny it just because someone else's story seems worse.
Okay, one more hurdle she highlights. The limits of traditional cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, for some deeper issues. She gives this great example. Person A and person B both get a coffee date canceled. Person A is cool, flexible. Person B immediately spirals thinking, they hate me, I'm too needy.
Right. And standard CBT would be good at spotting person B's thinking errors, the mind reading, the catastrophizing. It would offer ways to reframe those thoughts. But Dr. Williams argues that often doesn't go deep enough. It might miss the underlying experiential stuff, the relational wounds from the past, maybe a lifetime of feeling let down or unworthy, the things that created those thinking patterns in the first place. She uses another story, Megan's, to show how healing deep relational issues often needs more than just cognitive tweaks.
Okay, so we've really mapped out the problem, the roots, the common roadblocks. But understanding isn't enough, right? Let's shift now to the tools. The empowering stuff Dr. Williams offers to actually move towards wholeness. She starts with two basics, psychological mindedness and mindfulness.
Psychological mindedness. That's like realizing our inner world thoughts, feelings, motives isn't just random noise.
Exactly. It's understanding that this internal stuff is fundamental to our well-being, to how we navigate everything.
Okay. And mindfulness.
Mindfulness, which researchers define basically as paying attention to the present moment, being aware of what's happening right now. So that's crucial. And it's not about needing fancy cushions or anything. It's just about taking time deliberately to check in. What am I actually feeling? Stepping back from the noise. It's key for emotional attunement. Ah, yes, emotional attunement. She describes that as being truly present with our feelings, acknowledging them, letting ourselves feel them instead of pushing them away. And doing that opens up these Micro moments, she calls them. Little chances to step in and change our reaction because we understand the why behind it.
That's such a critical piece. If we don't tune in, we miss the very information we need to intervene effectively and make real changes. She even provides an audio file with the book, actually, to help practice this attunement.
Next, she tackles shame head-on, calls it maybe the most destructive emotion, and she's careful to distinguish it from guilt. Guilt is, I did something bad. Shame is, I am bad. Big difference.
Huge difference. Shame silences us, she says. It keeps us stuck in those self-punishing cycles.
So what's the antidote?
Compassion. But not just for others, crucially, self-compassion. It means actively noticing and shifting that negative self-talk, making a conscious choice. I'm letting go of this shame. She shares examples, even from working with men in prison. Some could face their shame about their actions and start healing. Others just defended against it, blamed others, shamed others back. Her point is, you have to actively work on releasing shame. It doesn't just evaporate on its own.
And then there's something really inspiring, post-traumatic growth, PTG. She experienced this herself. It's this idea that positive psychological change can actually come out of struggling with really difficult life challenges.
Yeah. Dr. Williams described how losing her husband, Maddie, as horrific as it was, eventually led her to feel more self-assured, more confident, a greater sense of her own worth, unexpectedly.
Wow. What does that growth look like?
Well, she outlines 5 main areas. Feeling stronger personally, changing your priorities in life, relationships improving or deepening, shifts in your life, philosophy, and sometimes spiritual development too. It's almost like, muscles getting stronger through stress. Trauma, paradoxically, can teach us, help a more resilient, maybe wiser version of ourselves emerge.
And that experience directly led to her own philosophy, powerfully imperfect living.
Right. It's not like a formal therapy model. It's more a way of being, a philosophy of action, but rooted in psychological evidence. It's about embracing that we're not perfect, making empowered choices anyway, even with uncertainty, and really living fully. For her, it was born from that senseless loss.
So it's about defining for ourselves what powerfully imperfect looks like.
Exactly. The goal isn't perfection, which sets up the next practical tool perfectly, the Good Lives model.
The Good Lives Model, GLM. Okay, this sounds useful. It's a framework for looking at our core human needs across different areas.
Yeah, 11 domains. Things like healthy living, pleasure, connection, meaning, work, stuff like that. It actually started in work with offenders, helping them find healthy ways to meet needs they were previously trying to meet through crime. But it's useful for absolutely anyone.
How does it work, practically?
Well, the idea is simple but powerful. If our basic needs in these areas aren't met, we might unconsciously try to meet them in unhealthy ways. So the GLM helps you identify, where are my needs unmet, and then how can I find healthier, more constructive, pro-social ways to meet them? That leads to a good life. Like, say your need for excitement was met by risky behavior. The GLM helps you find other ways, maybe learning a skill, creative projects, exercise healthy ways to get that stimulation.
Makes sense. Okay, finally, relational formulation and exit strategies. This sounds like mapping patterns.
Pretty much. It's about tracing those ingrained relational patterns. They're sometimes called reciprocal role procedures, or RRPs, from childhood into your adult life. For instance, if you grew up feeling controlled, maybe as an adult you're overly critical, or you swing between feeling controlled and trying to control others.
So you map the pattern.
Yeah.
Then what?
Then you develop exit strategies. Conscious ways to step out of those unhelpful cycles when you notice them happening. And at the same time, you work on strengthening the healthy patterns. Dr. Williams uses her own parenting as an example, noticing when she might be too controlling, consciously choosing to ease up while still holding appropriate boundaries. It's really about looking at the how-to guide for life you got as a kid and deciding as an adult if those instructions still work for you.
Wow, what an incredibly rich exploration we've had today, really unpacking Dr. Laura Williams' insights on what to do when you feel broken. We've looked at trauma, conditioning big and small, and covered so many powerful practical tools for healing and growth.
Yeah, we've touched on that logic versus feeling gap, the unseen conditioning, facing shame with compassion. These seem like really foundational steps. And the book really does offer this clear path towards psychological mindedness, emotional attunement, even that possibility of post-traumatic growth. It's quite empowering.
So what's the big takeaway here for you listening? I think it's that healing isn't some final destination. It's a process. It's ongoing. It's about self-discovery, conscious choice. And like Dr. Williams says, you really don't need to wait for some huge crisis to start this inner work. any of us can begin right now.
Absolutely. And her philosophy, Powerfully Imperfect Living, is such a great reminder. Yes, life throws things at us, events shape us. But our internal story, how we make sense of it, the ongoing work of self-awareness, that's where we get to choose our path. The work might never be truly done, as she says, but maybe that journey itself, embracing imperfection, moving towards wholeness, maybe that's the most empowering part.
Definitely. And if you do feel ready to go deeper, to really start applying these ideas, Dr. Williams offers great resources right in the book. There's a downloadable workbook with exercises, that attunement audio file we mentioned. We definitely recommend checking those out if this resonated with you.